It is that time of year, friends. It is the time of year where I can finally wear turtlenecks every single day, even though I do that anyway. Even though fall does not exist in the country that I live in, but we can pretend that it does, because it's fall. Hello, book reading friends. Welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you're new. My name is Mel, and today I bring you guys a book recommendations video. I am going to give you guys some book recs. These are going to be cozy books that you can read this fall. Not necessarily spooky books. I am not known for reading spooky books. You guys know I am not necessarily a scaredy cat, because I do dare every now and again to watch or read spooky things, but that is not at the forefront of my reading typically. But I do love books with beautiful lyrical writing, with darker themes, with pain and murder, which in my opinion all fit this category of all. I have 10 book recommendations for you guys about books that you have definitely not heard about on my channel. That is completely sarcastic and also might be concerning that I am relating fall and coziness to pain and murder. That's a conversation for another time. A book that you wouldn't think or relate to the word cozy based on the themes, but a book that just screams fall to me because it's so dark, and it's one of my favorite books of all time, and that is Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo. Wow, Mel, you're so original talking about Ninth House in the fall season. Everybody else is probably talking about this book too, but with good reason. In this one, we have a dark academic setting, and when I say dark, I mean really, really dark. There's a bunch of trigger warnings for this book. I'll definitely leave them all detailed in the description in case you guys are wondering, but we follow Alex Stern, who is the last seeming candidate to attend any sort of Ivy League. However, as she finds herself as a sole survivor of an accident on a hospital bed, she receives the opportunity of a lifetime to go to Yale University. Full ride, no expenses, everything's paid for you, sweetheart. You're gonna have the time of your life, potentially. But it is all for the sole purpose of using a set of abilities that Alex Stern has, which is seeing and communicating with the dead. And soon enough, Alex does find herself involved in the secret societies within Yale, and it is much darker than she could have ever imagined. There is also a mystery element to this book, which is really nice, and it really does take up the majority and the bulk of this book, but I really love the atmosphere for this. I think Leigh Bardugo truly nailed that cozy, arguably so, dark academic setting, and Alex is one of my favorite female characters. I truly love her development throughout this book and how she puts herself on the line when she truly doesn't have to for other people, just for the sake of keeping people safe. I think it's very admirable. I really, again, love her as a character. She's gone through so much, and I think that's a journey worth reading. And the book in general just really has some great commentary about people in power, about money, about these high education settings, and I truly loved every second of this. I will say, if you're looking to get into this hoping to see Alex go to class and deal with everyday student things, you won't really see that, because we don't really see Alex ever taking lessons at this school, but it is much more so about that secret society element that, again, Leigh Bardugo really nailed on this one. A recent favorite of mine, and one that I definitely need everybody to give a try, not on audio, I will say. I haven't read the audiobook, but I personally don't think that it's a book that's doable, at least for me, on audio. If you want to give it a try, definitely do, and let me know how that went for you, by the way. It's definitely a dense book that I believe is meant to be read physically, because it's really an experience. Also, would recommend a classical music soundtrack in the background that you can listen to and really get yourself in the mood. It truly does hit different. Just light a candle, get yourself in that cozy setting, and trust me when I say you'll come out on top. That's what I did, and I enjoyed every single second of it, and that is Middle Game by Shannon Maguire. I truly found myself time and time again in awe of Shannon Maguire's writing in this one, and all of these wild themes that she manages to truly address, convey, and explore. It was just done so beautifully in this book that I was, again, in constant awe as I was reading, because I've never read anything quite like this. And the way that I think about this book is, imagine this conspiracy theory. Human beings are born with the ability to be telepaths and to have telekinesis and to be fantastical. Imagine the X-Men, but in real life. However, as humans grow older, they lose the ability to do these things because they haven't practiced enough, because we use such little capacity of our brains to do so. What would happen if we bred and fostered kids, children, babies in these very conditioned settings so that they can foster and truly explore these powers and exploits them to their full potential in order to reach godhood. We follow Roger and Dodger, who are twin siblings, and they were separated at birth by this alchemist named Reed. And Reed for the longest time has been trying to achieve the doctrine of ethos. He has been trying to walk the improbable road and reach the impossible city, and in order to do so, he has quite literally through alchemy made people, babies, to see what lengths he has to go to in order to achieve everything that he has set out to do. And that's truly where Roger and Dodger come into play, because both of them have very different abilities. While Roger is very gifted at linguistics and literature, Dodger is very gifted at numbers, mathematics, physics, anything really to do with probabilities and equations. That's absolutely her. The writing in this, it is so detailed and atmospheric, and it oftentimes felt so lyrical even though it's not. It just had such a poetic tone to it, and also the way that Seanan Maguire builds this tension, builds this sense of dread was absolutely stunning, quite literally, because you are at the edge of your seat throughout the whole book, truly wondering if they're gonna do it, if they're going to achieve it, and through what means. Of course, at first it was a little bit confusing because it's a very ambitious book, but I think once you acclimate yourself to the world and you truly keep on reading, you'll get yourself used to it, you'll love it, hopefully, fingers crossed, and you'll come out on top on this one. A book that I am not done with yet, but I definitely needed to put this on here because I don't think there is a better time of year to read this in than during fall, and that is The Shadow of the Wind by Carlos Ruiz Zafón. Obviously, Spanish copy, La Sombra del Viento. It is so majestic. This is literally peak literature in every way possible, in my opinion. I absolutely love the writing in this book. It's definitely a denser book, but when I do think of the fall, I think of denser books, really. Books that are longer, books that are more atmospheric, books that, again, tend to be lyrical or flowery. And also through this book, I think it's the perfect opportunity to branch out and read more translated fiction and to read things that are not traditionally published in the US. And this is set in Barcelona in 1945, which is super nice and refreshing to have something in a completely different country. And we follow our main character, Daniel, who after his mother's death has found himself in a big state of grief. He goes through this journey alongside his father, and the one thing that has truly provided him a lot of comfort is this book called The Shadow of the Wind. And he grows so fascinated, in fact, that he sets out to find every other book by the same author named Julian Carax, except when he finds out that all of this author's books are actually very rare to find, and the very last few copies in print are being burnt by a very mysterious person. And he will set out on this journey in underground Barcelona to find out exactly what's happening, exactly who's doing these things, and potentially solve this mystery. This is a series, which I absolutely love as well, but the writing in this, you guys, I obviously am not reading the translation, so I wouldn't be able to tell you, though I do own it. It's up there. I absolutely adore the writing in this book. It is something unlike anything I've ever read, and it's truly pulling me out of this mindset of, oh, because I used to read so many Hispanic classics when I was in school for coursework, I now want to read more because I know what I've been missing this whole time. It is so descriptive and atmospheric, and it truly sets the scene so perfectly for you. There is not one thing that you can't imagine, and there is not one voice that is mixed with another. Every single character has such a distinctive voice, such a distinctive motif, and the way that all of these characters' stories weave together is honestly out of this world. And not only that, but the complexity in this book as well is truly astounding. The way that all of these stories weave together and parallel each other and mirror each other, it's truly such a stunning work of art that I still cannot get over it. It's definitely a book that I'm taking slowly because it is a lot to take in, but for the people who have been reading the translation, I've been hearing incredible things. This is our patron book club pick for October, and if you want to join us, you're still in time. You can join us on the link in my description because obviously we're still reading it and we're gonna discuss it at the end of the month. But this is such an incredible read, and I'm so glad that we decided to read this because I've been hearing nothing but incredible things outside of this. And then for the people who've already read it, who are Citadel members, they're all, for the majority, giving it 5 stars, and that is just It makes my heart so happy. It just makes me so warm. A staple for the fall, some would say, and that is the original vampire story, and that is Dracula by Bram Stoker. I think when anybody thinks about the quintessential fall read, they all think of Dracula, or at least most of the people that I know would argue that Dracula is one of those books. It is gothic literature, which is perfect for this time of year, and it is very slow. Again, the atmosphere is at the forefront of the story. It's about that sense of dread. It's about that sense of, as I like to call it, the feeling of impending doom. That's what this book feels like, because you're just constantly waiting for everything to go awfully wrong. The writing style is also very different. It is epistolary writing, which means that it is told through a series of letters and journal entries, which is so fascinating, and I love the fact that the story is told in that format. You never truly get to see the story through Dracula's eyes, but rather people surrounding Dracula, which again was super fascinating for me. And I don't think this book needs any introduction, and that's why I'm describing all of the elements that make this a perfect book for the fall. It's truly the one that set the bar and that provided all of that groundwork for what we now know as vampire mythos. And it's so fascinating, again, to read where all of this comes from. I think the gothic genre as this sub-branch of literature is really interesting to me, because oftentimes people don't know what they're getting themselves into. When you talk about gothic literature, it's again about that atmosphere, it's about the description, it's about those romantic tones and elements that you wouldn't otherwise see in typical horror. The audiobook also, it's really, really good. Alan Cummings and Tim Curry narrate this audiobook, or at least the one that I listened to. It's very, very good. And alongside Dracula, I can't not talk about this book because it goes along so perfectly. And if you want the Dracula vibes without reading Dracula and getting that sexy, gothic, very descriptive and lyrical moment, A Diary of Blood by S.D. Gibson. It's literally 235 pages. It is super short, and this is a book that I read and it instantly pulled me out of a slump. It is so short, but it packs on so many amazing elements. It talks a lot about these cycles of abuse towards women, and it did it so perfectly in such a short amount of pages. I came to realize how much an author is capable of doing in such a short amount of pages, in a limited word count, and truly be intentional with what they're writing and what they're putting out into the world. It's lyrical, it's poetic. It is not told necessarily through epistolary writing, though it feels like it, because it feels like a collection of letters and journal entries addressed towards Dracula, which again just did it for me. It's sapphic, it's got a polyamorous relationship. I'm sure you could get through this book in a single day because it goes by super fast and you'll have no regrets. Fingers crossed. I say those things very liberally, but I do understand the fact that reading is subjective. However, book is good. Book is good. May I throw a middle grade on here? I know it's a book that I've talked about before plenty of times, but it's got a library setting. It's super cozy. It literally speaks to the title of this video. It's fun. It warms your soul as you read it, and that is Pages & Co. The series, the first book, Tilly and the Book Wanderers by Anna James. It is so heartwarming, and it just brings you a sense of peace and happiness. It truly took me back to those stories that I used to listen or read as I was younger, because our main character Tilly has the ability to book wander, meaning that it is a sort of magic in which she can insert herself into her favorite books or pull characters out from her favorite books. And we get to meet and interact with some of those classic middle grade characters like Alice in Wonderland and Anne of Green Gables, and it was honestly so much fun. It was so interesting to get to know this world and the ins and outs of it, and all of the lessons that Tilly as a character needed to go through. I think middle grade is also perfect for this time of year because they're magical and lighthearted while still packing on so much. And I definitely think this is one of those books that if you have kids, or if you have little cousins or little siblings or any sort of family member that is younger, you could definitely read this with them, to them, or by yourself. I'm reading this now and I know a lot of other people who are reading this now, and it is honestly a beautiful form of escapism. I've loved every second, and this also contains a mystery element, which is really good because our main character Tilly, her mother disappeared when she was very young. Her father was also absent, and so now Tilly, knowing that she has this sort of magic, embarks on this journey to potentially figure out what happened to her mother when she was younger. I cannot say enough good things about the series, about this book. Is this a Mel video if she doesn't talk about Stormlight now? Because I don't think it would be. I also truly believe that Stormlight is the perfect fall read. These books are long, obviously, they're massive, they're 1,000 pages apiece, and truly believe me, or try to believe me, give me a vote of confidence here when I say that honestly the most intimidating thing about these books is the page count. It is not the book, it is not the content, it is not the writing. It is simply the fact that when you look at this book, it looks like a brick. It genuinely looks so big. But when I tell you guys that these books are so easy to read and fall in love with these characters, it is truly sensational what Sanderson has managed to done here. And I truly flew through Way of Kings, arguably so considering the page count, because it just sucked me right in. It is one of those books that, of course, because it's so long, you have a nook and space for everything. You have the time to establish characters, and you have the time to establish the world and the atmosphere and everything to do with this narrative. And Sanderson's writing, unlike his other works that I've read, at least in Stormlight, it feels somewhat lyrical and poetic, and that is a tone that I have found myself missing as I read his other works. And I truly believe wholeheartedly that this is my favorite Sanderson series that I've read, because it has such a magical quality that of course the others do have, but this just shines so much brighter. But if I were to recommend any Sanderson to anybody, it would be, wildly enough, The Way of Kings. But we live in this world called Roshar, and in Roshar there used to be this very elite committee called the Knights Radiant, and these people used to fight with shard blades and shard plates, which are these magical artifacts that through hundreds and thousands of years have given men these mythical godlike abilities, power that can seemingly beat just about anything. And of course, just like these artifacts have ended wars, they have also raised wars, and we now find ourselves in the midst of a war in this place called the Shattered Plains. And there are of course different sides to this war. We first have Kaladin, who is a bridgesman, and these are people who literally carry bridges across the entire Shattered Plains, which is a collection of chasms, in order for the army to plow through the war. And then we've got Dalinar, who once upon a time used to be obsessed alongside his brother with this text called The Way of Kings, and this text still haunts him to this day. He gets these visions and he believes that he is out of it most of the time, and he is still on the search for the meaning of these excerpts and these extracts that he gets in his brain. And then on the other side of things, we've got Shallan. We follow her and her journey as a scholar with Jasna Kholin, and that is essentially the synopsis that I can give you guys, because this is definitely one of those books that goes by super slow, because Sanderson is not timid when establishing what is going on and writing 10-page battle scenes. I absolutely love those, and there is some great ambiance for this book that I found that I just listen to time and time again, and it just sets the mood so perfectly for this that I will never speak enough great things about my experience with The Way of Kings, because it truly was phenomenal. Another one of my favorites that I read this time last year, again during the fall season, or peak fall I should say, because I read this right as it was coming out, like a little bit before, and that is The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. I don't know if the paperback version is out yet. This is an ARC. It is the only copy of Addie that I own, which is atrocious, saying that it's literally one of my favorite books of all time. But I know this is not arguably every person's favorite. I just think it really spoke to me and my soul, and really just ran me over with a lot of things that I needed to hear in the moment that I read it in. This book is really a beautiful journey. It's very character driven as opposed to the other books. I think this book would not exist without Addie. Like, Addie is literally the sole purpose of why this book goes and exists and progresses. If you are looking for plot, maybe not the one, but if you don't mind having that very cozy atmosphere, if you don't mind having a little bit of a sadder story, and again the characters being at the forefront of why the story happens, then I definitely say give this one a go. We obviously follow Addie LaRue, and we follow her as she is in a very unhappy place with her life. She truly does not want to settle for what society believes and says that she needs to do at her age and at the point in time when she's alive. And so in order to get out of these unfortunate situations that she keeps finding herself in, she makes a deal with this dark entity that she literally stumbles upon in the woods, where she gives away her soul for immortality. And her wish is granted because she is allowed to roam free through the earth, doing whatever she pleases for eternity, except that there is one catch, and that is that everybody she stumbles across and meets will soon forget her name. So her name and herself are erased from history as a consequence. And it will not be until 300 years later where she walks into a bookstore and she meets this man called Henry, who is the first person to ever remember her. It It really talks about what it means to make an impact and feelings of inadequacy, and I just found it so beautiful. I love how all of these realizations came to her at the right time. I love the fact that it was so lyrical and flowery, and that again, the atmosphere was so cozy, and it's very different to Schwab's other works. In fact, it is one of the few Schwabs that I've actually enjoyed. I am not a Schwab stan, surprisingly enough, to whoever wants to believe that. And this is one of the few that I've read that I've gone, oh shit, she can write. I love this. And so if you're down for that sort of sentimental, mellow, emo girl hours sort of read, I definitely say go for this one. Another book that I think is fantastic for this time of year and whose audiobook is literally out of this world, Into the Drowning Deep by Mira Grant, also known as Seanan McGuire. Hello. It is mainly set at sea, and the commentary on human evolution will literally give you an existential crisis. I honestly will say it once more, Seanan McGuire's research, I truly need to see what the research process looks like for this woman, because all of her books are so different that I've read so far, but they have this thread of academia and knowledge and just brains. These books scream brains. And you guys know, if you've been here for a while, that I typically don't love books set at sea. There's just something about them that are not that interesting to me. I just think they're typically very passive storylines with very limited interesting elements, at least for me personally. And the fact that I still enjoyed this so much regardless of that fact is truly astounding, because there's just, again, something fascinating about life at sea and how little as humanity we've actually gotten to explore, that it makes you wonder what truly delves in there. If you're scared of the ocean, do not read this book, because you will never go to a beach ever again. Like, I promise you, you won't. And the catalyst for this book is this ship that went missing 7 years before the start of the book. This crew, this ship had set out on this mission to film a documentary about what delves at sea and to potentially discover monsters and mythical creatures that live in the Mariana Trench. However, the book really kickstarts with a new crew and with our main character in particular, whose sister had gone missing in that ship 7 years ago. And she now sets out with them in the hopes of finding out what happened to her sister and what truly lives in the Mariana Trench that was so dangerous 7 years in the past. The sense of dread, the scares, it is truly a book that I was listening to and I just had to stop because I was so scared, you guys. I am typically, when I listen to audiobooks, I'm like, I'm fine, I'm good, I'm fine. And then this audiobook really made me stop and take my earphones off, because the narrator really went in, okay, with the acting skills. I also, as you can see, started annotating, and then I slowly gave up because I was sitting like this, just listening to the audiobook. I couldn't do anything else. I couldn't follow along because it had me in it. If you want to have an existential crisis about the world and the sea, definitely give it a read, but if you're scared of the sea, steer clear. And last, but certainly not least, of course I have A Discovery of Witches. Of course I do. Do you take thee as a monster? Because I'm not. And it's got a really great TV show to accompany it. Season 1 is only book 1. But we follow Diana Bishop, who is our main character, and she is a witch in denial. She does not accommodate herself to this lifestyle. She has been wanting to erase this part of her for what seems like forever. She is in fact a scholar at Oxford University, and one day, just walking through the halls of the Oxford Bodleian Library, she finds this alchemical ancient text called the Ashmole 782 and starts a war between species. And now she has the target on her back for being able to grab and open this book, which is something that people technically cannot do. And she finds herself in this unlikely position of allying with a vampire, Matthew Claremont, which is against all rules. They are not meant to talk to each other, to be with each other romantically. And so as they find themselves trying to save their necks, they also find themselves breaking every rule and falling in love. And it's incredible, and I love it. Like, honestly, atmosphere, academia, libraries, witches, demons, vampires, an incredibly angsty romance. It is very much set in history. The author, Deborah Harkness, is a historian, so a lot of what happens in this book is very dense, but the way that she so seamlessly manages to grab elements from history and subvert them to fit into this fictional world is so exquisitely done. Because I'm not a person that cares too much about science. I do care about history, but it was never like my favorite favorite subject in school, but the way this woman really made me care for every date and every event and every page and every word. I was reading this and I was literally talking to my brother and I was like, why do I care? That's the question. Why do I care? And it's just the fact that she made such complex but intellectually interesting characters. It just had me hooked, and I would not give this up for the world. You guys know it's one of my favorite books. I still need to finish Shadow of Night, so let me walk by peacefully. Don't at me. Definitely a perfect book for this time of year. And those are all the books that I have for you guys today. I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, don't forget to smash that like button down below, and also let me know, what books would you recommend around this time of year? What are those books that you continuously go back to during fall season? Or if there are any books that you have your eyes set on for this fall season, also let us know. If you've read any of these, what are your thoughts? What are your opinions? Do you agree? Let me know in the comments as per usual. If you've reached the end of this video, let's leave some pumpkin emojis down below. Like the Halloween pumpkin, I think that's the only pumpkin emoji that exists. Let's leave that one in the comments if you've reached the very end. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already for more bookish content. As you guys know, I upload 2 to 3 times a week. And if you want to support the channel further, I do have a Patreon. It is always linked down below if you want early access, extra live streams, a Discord server, and all of the fun and chats with me. Again, that is always linked down below alongside all of my social medias. Thank you guys so much for watching. I love you all, and I shall see you on the next one. Bye, guys.